There is a reason the Odyssey has survived for nearly 3,000 years. How many changes has the world gone through during that time? Society, culture, technology, communication, transportation. And still, people keep returning to the story of one man trying to find his way home. But why do millions of people still return to the Odyssey? Christopher Nolan could easily have written this as an original screenplay today. Why does the journey of a man who lived in the ancient world still feel strangely timeless? Because this was never just a story about ancient Greece. It is a story about us. Not because we have fought monsters or sailed across ancient seas, but because we eventually feel lost, distracted by things that promised happiness, and we forget what matters. That it is the human journey of trying to become someone better and failing more than once. Odysseus is not only traveling across the Mediterranean, he is traveling through the human mind. Every island is a temptation, every storm is a setback, every delay is another version of the question every generation asks in its own way. How do I become who I'm meant to be? That is why this story refuses to age, because the journey home was never just about Ithaca, but it was about the journey back to yourself. Let's walk through it, not as a myth from the past, but as a mirror. The story begins right after the Trojan War ends, after lasting 10 years. Odysseus, also known as Ulysses in Latin, a brilliant, cunning man, should be only a few weeks away from home, but instead it will take him another 10 years. And here's where it gets interesting. His name in the original Greek is connected to the idea of the one who causes pain or the one who suffers anger. He is not just clever, he is a man still ruled by his emotions, his pride, and his need to be seen as the smartest person in the room. And the sea he is about to cross is not just water, it is the space between who he is and who he needs to become. Water is one of the most common symbols in mythology. A symbol can never be said to mean only one thing, it is always open to multiple interpretations. But water often represents the manifested world. It is as if Odysseus' mind is trapped in the material world. He is being thrown from one side of the ocean to the other because he is in conflict with that material world itself. The turning point comes on the island of the Cyclops. Polyphemus, whose name suggests many visions, serves as a mirror that shows Odysseus he can only escape alive if he erases his own name and importance. Trapped in a cave with this one-eyed giant who is eating his men one by one, Odysseus does something remarkably wise. When the Cyclops asks his name, he answers, "Nobody." So when he attacks the Cyclops, the giant screams, "Nobody is attacking me." It is a small but brilliant act of humility. He has to become nobody. In other words, he must conquer humility. He must subordinate his selfishness and his vanity in order to escape. But then, as they escape and the ship pulls away, he cannot help himself. Odysseus' vanity is still his greatest weakness, so he turns back toward the shore and shouts his real name across the water. He wants credit, he wants the Cyclops to know exactly who defeated him. Think about that for a second. He had already won and he was already safe. And still, his ego needed one more thing, recognition, and that one extra thing costs him a decade of his life. How many times have you already won something, already gotten what you needed, but could not just walk away? You had to say the last word, prove the point, make sure they knew it was you. That single act of vanity changes everything, because Polyphemus is the son of Poseidon, god of the sea, and he hears his son's cry for revenge. What could have been a short trip home becomes a 10-year sentence. The sea sends Odysseus through one trial after another, and each one strips away something he no longer needs. First, forgetting. On the island of the Lotus-Eaters, his men taste a strange fruit and instantly forget where they came from. They forget the mission, they forget home, they forget everything. They want to remain on the island forever, trapped in a state of comfortable but alienated survival. Odysseus has to physically drag them back to the ships. The island of the Lotus-Eaters clearly represents forgetfulness, the loss of purpose and identity in exchange for superficial comfort, the kind of comfort that feels so good you stop asking where you were actually headed. Almost everyone has tasted their own version of the lotus, the job that pays well but says nothing about who you are. The scrolling that numbs the hours, the routine that never hurts but never helps you grow. Then instinct. On Circe's island, his men are turned into pigs. The symbolic interpretation is that she merely revealed what they already were internally, beings driven by raw instinct and material desire. This episode symbolizes looking inward to confront your own imperfections and flaws so they don't end up taking control of your own life. Odysseus must face that part of himself before he can lead his men forward again. Then memory. He travels to the edge of the underworld Hades, and there, among the dead, he meets his own mother. She reminds him to remember who he is and what he must do to reclaim his center, Ithaca. It is a strange and haunting scene, a return to consciousness, a reminder of his purpose. Then temptation. The Sirens sing a song no man can resist, a song that has wrecked every ship that ever passed. The Sirens sing a very specific song to each person, telling them exactly what they most want to hear. Odysseus doesn't pretend he is strong enough to resist it. Instead, he does something wiser. He ties himself to the mast and allows himself to hear the song. He simply makes sure that no matter how desperately he wants to give in, his body is physically incapable of following that impulse. That single image has outlived the myth itself. We still call it Ulysses' Pact. The decision you make today while you are strong to protect the version of yourself that will be weak tomorrow. The alarm you place across the room, the person you tell about your goal so you cannot quietly abandon it, the promise you make to your future self before temptation even appears. And finally, loss. His starving men kill and eat the sacred cattle of the sun god. It is a final act of taking what was never theirs to take. And the punishment is absolute. The ships are destroyed and every one of his men dies. Odysseus alone survives, washed onto the shore of the nymph Calypso, where he is trapped for 7 years, comfortable, desired, cared for, and completely stuck, attached only to comfort and physical beauty, unable to continue his spiritual journey. He only leaves the island through the intervention of the goddess Athena, his mentor. Calypso's island symbolizes stagnation caused by material pleasure, requiring a higher force, the awakening of divine consciousness for the individual to resume the path of inner evolution. And when he finally escapes, his raft is destroyed in a storm. He loses everything, his ship, his crew, even his clothes. Everything he once owned and took pride in disappears. It is his process of spiritual purification. Odysseus must let go of all his flaws, weaknesses, and coarse attachments, symbolized by his men and material possessions, so that he can become completely purified. What remains is only what truly mattered, his own bare body, protected only by the veil given to him by the goddess Leucothea to guard his heart. That is the real shape of purification. It is not becoming more, it is losing enough that you can finally see what was never negotiable in the first place. By the time Odysseus finally reaches Ithaca, he arrives home in disguise. He is dressed as a beggar, unrecognized by almost everyone he loves. It marks a profound symbolism of inner order and self-mastery. The man who once shouted his own name across the sea to receive credit is now the same man who deliberately chooses invisibility. His palace has been taken over by suitors, men who moved into his home, ate his food, and tried to take his wife and his throne during the 20 years he was gone. Those suitors represent every part of you that takes over the moment you stop paying attention. The habits, the excuses, the versions of yourself that appear when your true self has been absent for too long. And in the myth's final and brutal act, Odysseus reveals himself and reclaims his home. He is finally reunited with Penelope, his wife, who spent 20 years refusing every suitor, weaving and unweaving her looms simply to buy time, waiting for a man everyone else had already given up on. She becomes, in this story, the one thing that never left: the soul. Still faithful, still waiting for you to return to yourself. Perhaps we will have our own Cyclops, a moment when all we needed to do was remain silent and pride made us speak anyway. Maybe we will have our own Lotus, a comfort so gentle that we almost forget we were going somewhere. And we will probably have our own mast to tie ourselves to, our own Calypso to eventually leave, and our own suitors sitting on the throne of our attention. And like Odysseus, the real journey was never only about reaching Ithaca, but about the wisdom and experience we accumulate on the way back to our own center, our own essence. The final lesson is that the Odyssey is the journey of every human being in search of our true spiritual identity, and that's the reason we still recognize ourselves in the story. It is the process of subordinating everything that makes us selfish, vain, or brutal, and of learning to persevere through obstacle after obstacle until we find the balance between doing and being. And beyond recognizing ourselves, the reason it has remained alive for nearly 3,000 years is that human being can evolve through painful experience or through philosophical reflection. And the Odyssey is an excellent opportunity to reflect so that unnecessary suffering can be avoided.
If this reflection resonated with you, like and subscribe to The Arise. New reflections await.